I came home from the hospital on a Tuesday, and the first thing I heard when I pushed open the front door was my daughter-in-law laughing. Not a warm laugh. Not the kind that makes you feel welcome. The sharp, quick kind. The kind that stops the moment someone realizes you're standing there. She stopped. My son looked up from the couch. Neither of them moved to help me with the bag I was dragging. I'd just spent 11 days in a cardiac unit at Mercy General in Columbus, Ohio. 11 days with monitors beeping through the night, with nurses waking me every few hours to check my blood pressure, with a cardiologist named Dr. Ellison telling me my heart had been working too hard for too long. 11 days alone because my son said he couldn't take time off work, and his wife, well, she never offered. I set my bag down by the door myself. "You're back," my daughter-in-law said. Her name was Tara. She said it the way you'd say the mail's here. My son, his name is Doug, stood up finally and gave me a half hug, the kind where only one arm makes contact. He smelled like the cologne I'd given him for Christmas 3 years ago. I remembered buying it. I remembered wrapping it. I remembered him opening it and nodding and setting it aside without much reaction. "How are you feeling, Dad?" "Better," I said. "Tired." "The guest room's the same," Tara said, already walking back toward the kitchen. "We didn't touch anything." "The guest room. I want you to understand something. The house we were standing in. The house Doug and Tara lived in. I had co-signed the mortgage on it 6 years earlier. I had given them $40,000 for the down payment. That money came from 31 years of working as a civil engineer for the city of Columbus, from skipping vacations, from driving used cars, and brown bagging my lunch. My wife Eleanor had contributed too. Before she passed, we'd given it to them because we loved our son, and because Tara was pregnant with our granddaughter at the time, and because I believed, that family meant something. I was sleeping in the guest room. A twin bed, a lamp with a broken switch you had to wiggle just right, a window that faced the side of the neighbor's vinyl fence. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself I just needed to recover, get my strength back, and then I'd figure out the next step. My own condo in Westerville had been sold 2 years earlier. Eleanor's medical bills had been significant, and after she passed, the maintenance costs alone were more than my pension covered comfortably. Moving in with Doug and Tara had seemed like the sensible choice at the time. They had the space. We were family. But something had shifted in that house, slowly, the way a foundation settles. By the time I came home from the hospital, I could feel it in every room. I noticed it in small ways at first. There was a coffee maker on the counter, a new one, a nice one, that Tara had mentioned wanting for months. I'd seen her look at it online once when I walked behind her. Now it was there, gleaming, and when I reached for it the morning after I came home, she said, without looking up from her phone, "I'd prefer you not use that one. It's calibrated." I used the old drip machine she'd moved to the corner shelf, the one with the cracked carafe that dripped on the counter if you poured too fast. I noticed it in the dinner table. There were 3 chairs around it, Doug, Tara, and their daughter Emma, who was 5, and the best part of being in that house. When I came down for dinner the first night back, I had to pull in a chair from the side of the room. Nobody mentioned it. Nobody moved to get it for me. Emma looked at me with those big dark eyes and said, "Grandpa, you sit by me." And that was the kindest thing anyone said to me all evening. I noticed it in the heat, or the lack of it. My room ran cold. I mentioned it once to Doug and he said he'd look at the vent. He didn't look at the vent. I bought a small space heater from Walmart and kept it running at night, which made the electricity bill go up, which Tara commented on at the end of the month, with a look that lasted 3 full seconds longer than any look needed to. I started keeping to myself. I learned the schedule of the house. When Tara was on calls for work, when Doug left and came back, when Emma napped. I filled the hours. I read. I walked around the neighborhood in the mornings. Slow at first, then a little farther each day as my chest got stronger. I called my old friend Gary in Dayton sometimes, just to hear a friendly voice. I helped Emma with her drawings in the afternoon when Tara was busy. Those were good hours. But I could feel what was building. I just didn't know how close it already was. It was a Thursday evening in March when I found out. I'd gotten up around 9:30 to get a glass of water. The light was on in the kitchen, and I could hear voices. Doug and Tara speaking in the low, tight way people speak when they don't want to be heard but also don't want to stop talking. I stopped in the hallway. I know it wasn't right, standing there listening, but something in the tone of it, something cold and deliberate, held me in place. The lawyer said it straightforward. Tara was saying, if he's declared unable to manage his own finances, we get full authority. That's it. That's all it takes. He's not incompetent, Tara. He had a cardiac event, Doug. He's 67 years old. He lives here. We're already responsible for him in every practical sense. He pays for his own groceries. He uses our utilities. He drives up our insurance. And when things get worse, and they will get worse, Doug, you know that, we're the ones who end up dealing with it. A pause. The Meadowbrook place in Dublin has good reviews, she said. It's a memory care and assisted living facility. We wouldn't have to do it forever, just until the estate matter gets resolved. Estate matter. I pressed my back against the wall and made myself breathe slowly. What estate matter? Doug said. His pension, the survivor benefits from your mother's policy, whatever he has in accounts. If we have power of attorney. We don't have power of attorney. Yet, she said, my cousin went through this with her father-in-law. The doctor writes a letter, the judge signs off, and that's it. The family takes over management. It's not unusual. I stood there in the dark hallway of a house I had helped buy, listening to my daughter-in-law explain how to take everything I had left. I went back to my room. I sat on the edge of that twin bed and I looked at the space heater glowing orange in the corner. And I thought about Eleanor, about what she would have said, about the fact that she had loved Doug so completely and so without condition, and what she would have felt hearing those words. I didn't sleep, but I also didn't panic. That surprised me, honestly. I thought I'd be shaking. Instead, something quiet and very clear settled in me, the way cold air settles in a room before dawn. I knew what I needed to do. I just needed to move carefully. The next morning, I called my old college friend, a man named Ted Burkhart, who had practiced estate law in Cincinnati for 30 years before retiring. We'd stayed in touch over the years, Christmas cards, the occasional lunch when I was passing through. I hadn't asked him for anything since Eleanor's estate. He picked up on the second ring. I told him what I'd heard. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Are you safe right now?" "Yes," I said, "for now." "Okay," he said. "Here's what you need to understand. What she's describing is conservatorship. It's not impossible to pursue, but it requires a court process and medical documentation. You have time. Not a lot of time, but time. And there are things we can do right now, today, that make it significantly harder for them to pursue." He walked me through it. We spent an hour on the phone, and by the end of it, I had a plan. I didn't let on that I knew anything. That was the hardest part. Sitting across from Tara at dinner that night, watching her ask me how I was feeling, watching the way her eyes moved over me like she was calculating something. I said I was feeling much better. I thanked her for the meal. I helped Emma with her fork when she dropped it. Over the next 2 weeks, I made calls. I opened a new checking account at a credit union across town, one Tara wouldn't recognize on a statement. I contacted the HR department at my former employer to redirect my pension deposits. I called Social Security to update my contact information. I met with Ted's colleague, a practicing attorney named Susan Rowe, at her office in Worthington. And I signed documents that named my brother Glenn as my healthcare proxy and financial power of attorney. I also called Glenn. He lives in Knoxville, Tennessee. We had drifted some in recent years. Nothing dramatic. Just the slow drift of two men with busy, separate lives. When I told him what was happening, he went very quiet. And then he said, "You're coming to stay with me as soon as you're ready." I told him I wasn't ready yet. I told him there was something I needed to take care of first. Here's the part I haven't told many people. 3 months before I had the cardiac event, before any of this came to a head, I had received a letter from the estate of my mother's older sister, my Aunt Ruth, who had passed in February at the age of 91. I had not been close with Aunt Ruth in my adult years. She had never married, had no children, had lived quietly in a small house in Roanoke, Virginia for decades. I had visited her twice in 20 years. I'd sent Christmas cards. I'd called on her birthday when I remembered. The letter informed me that Ruth had left me the entirety of her estate. I didn't know she had an estate worth mentioning. She had lived simply. She'd driven a 10-year-old Buick and worn the same winter coat for a decade. What I did not know, what almost no one in the family had known, was that Ruth had spent 40 years carefully and quietly investing. Her financial advisor, a patient man in Roanoke who'd worked with her for 3 decades, set me the full accounting. The portfolio was worth a little over $900,000. There was also her house, which was paid off and appraised at $220,000. And there was a rental property she'd owned in Charlottesville, a duplex, fully leased, generating $3,100 a month. I had not told Doug. I had not told Tara. I want you to understand why. It wasn't strategy at first. When the letter came, I was 3 weeks out of the hospital, exhausted and fragile, still sleeping 12 hours a night, still getting winded walking to the end of the block. I hadn't processed it. I hadn't fully believed it. The numbers felt abstract, like something that was happening to a different person. I told myself I'd deal with it when I was stronger. But then I heard that conversation in the kitchen, and I understood, with a clarity I can only describe as cold, that the timing of what I'd just heard and what I was quietly sitting on, a portfolio of nearly $1.1 million and a rental income stream, was not a coincidence I could afford to ignore. Tara didn't know about the inheritance, but she knew I had pension income and survivor benefits from Eleanor's policy. She knew I wasn't destitute. She was already circling. If she found out about Aunt Ruth's estate, there would be no more waiting, no more slow maneuvering. She would move fast. So I moved faster. Susan Rowe helped me set up a revocable living trust. Ruth's estate transferred into it over the following 6 weeks, handled entirely through the executor in Roanoke and Susan's office. My name on the trust documents was filed in Virginia, not Ohio. The rental income from the Charlottesville duplex started going directly into the new credit union account. I kept showing up to dinner. I kept commenting on Emma's drawings. I kept saying I was feeling a little tired, but much better, thank you. One evening in April, Doug asked me if I'd thought about next steps. He said it carefully, like he'd rehearsed it. Tara was washing dishes with her back to us, but I could see the stillness in her shoulders. She was listening. I told him I'd been thinking about it. I told him I was looking into some options. I said I wasn't in any hurry, but I didn't want to be a burden on them indefinitely. Tara turned around at that. "You're not a burden," she said, and the sentence had no warmth in it whatsoever. "I appreciate that," I said. 2 weeks later, I told Doug I needed to go to Virginia to deal with some paperwork related to Aunt Ruth's estate. I said it casually at breakfast while Emma was eating her cereal. He looked up. Tara looked up. I watched both of their faces very carefully. "I didn't know Aunt Ruth had much of an estate," Doug said. "Not much," I said. "Just the house, some paperwork." I drank my coffee. "Should be a few days." I drove to Knoxville first. Glenn had the guest bedroom ready, a real one, with a real bed and a window that looked out over the yard. His wife Carol made a pot roast the first night. We sat at the dinner table for 2 hours, all 3 of us, and I told them everything. Glenn's jaw tightened once when I got to the part about the conservatorship conversation. Carol reached over and put her hand on mine. "You're not going back there," Glenn said. "I know," I said. I spent a week in Knoxville while Susan Rowe coordinated the last of the paperwork. I met with a real estate agent in Roanoke and listed Aunt Ruth's house. The market was good, and within 3 weeks, we had an accepted offer. I kept the Charlottesville duplex. On Susan's advice, I also had a formal letter sent to Doug and Tara. Not threatening, not dramatic, but clear. It confirmed that I had established independent financial arrangements, that I had designated Glenn as my legal proxy in all matters, and that I would not be returning to their home. I wrote Doug a separate letter, a personal one. I want to be honest about this part. It was the hardest thing I did through all of it. Doug is my son. I remember teaching him to ride his bike in the driveway of our house on Kellner Road. I remember driving him to college in the rain, the back of the car packed with everything he owned, and the way Eleanor cried all the way home and then laughed at herself for crying. I do not believe Doug is a cruel man. I believe he married someone whose fear of not having enough made her willing to do things he wouldn't have done on his own, and that he had slowly, quietly, chosen to follow her rather than question her. In the letter, I told him I loved him. I told him I was not angry. I told him what I had heard that night in the kitchen, not to punish him, but because I thought he deserved to know that I knew, and that I had not simply wandered away confused. I told him that I would always be his father, that Emma would always have a grandfather, and that when he was ready to talk, really talk, I would answer the phone. I also told him about the trust, about what Aunt Ruth had left me, about the duplex in Charlottesville and the account in my name that no one else had access to. I told him I was going to be all right. I don't know what happened in their house after that letter arrived. I've imagined it some. I hope it was clarifying. I've been living with Glenn and Carol in Knoxville for 6 months now. I have my own room here, a real room, and a house where I am wanted, where someone says good morning like they mean it. I've been going to a cardiac rehab program 3 times a week at a facility near their neighborhood. My numbers are good. Dr. Patel, my new cardiologist here, told me last month that my heart function has improved more than she expected. She said, and I wrote this down because I wanted to remember it, that stress is one of the most underestimated contributors to cardiac decline in men my age. I am not under that stress anymore. I've been looking at a small house in the Sequoia Hills neighborhood, nothing big, 2 bedrooms, a covered porch, a yard with 2 oak trees that are at least 50 years old. It's in my budget. It's quiet. It's mine, if I decide I want it. Emma called me on a Tuesday evening 3 weeks ago. Doug must have dialed for her, but it was her voice I heard when I picked up. Small and clear, and absolutely certain of itself the way 5-year-olds are. She said, "Grandpa, I drew you a picture of a horse. It has a purple tail." I told her that was the best kind of horse. She said she was going to mail it to me. I gave her Glenn and Carol's address, and I spelled it out slowly while she repeated the letters back to me with complete seriousness. I'm waiting for that picture. I've already decided where I'm going to hang it. On the wall of that house in Sequoia Hills, in the room with the covered porch, where the afternoon light comes in long and slow and belongs entirely to me. I keep thinking about that hallway, the dark, the low voices through the kitchen door, the way I pressed my back against the wall and just listened. In that moment, I wasn't angry. I wasn't even hurt, not yet. I was just still. And I think that stillness saved me. There's something that happens to a person when they've been treated as invisible for long enough. You start to believe it. You start to move quietly through rooms that used to feel like yours. You say, thank you for meals you never asked to be made. You apologize for the space you take up. I did that. I did it for months in that house. And I told myself it was patience or grace or keeping the peace. But somewhere underneath all of that, I think I just stopped trusting my own worth. That's the thing no one talks about. How being made to feel like a burden doesn't just change how others see you, it changes how you see yourself. What brought me back wasn't rage. It was clarity. Hearing Tara say what she said, in that flat, practical voice, talking about conservatorship and facilities and estate matters, it was like cold water. Not cruel water, just cold. It woke something up that I'd let go quiet. And what I did next wasn't revenge, not really. I want to be honest about that. I didn't set out to punish anyone. I called Ted because I needed someone I trusted to help me think straight. I opened that account because I needed to protect what was mine. I signed those documents with Susan because I'd spent too long letting other people make decisions around me without my knowledge. Every step I took was just me, finally, deciding that my life was worth the effort of defending. That takes more than anger. Anger burns fast. What I needed was something slower and more deliberate. I needed to think clearly when everything in me wanted to shut down. I needed to be honest with myself about what was happening, even when it meant admitting that my own son had let it happen. That kind of honesty cost something. But the alternative, staying in that cold room, eating at a table where I had to pull in my own chair, watching my granddaughter be the only person in the house who was genuinely glad I was there, that cost more. I wrote Doug that letter because he deserved the truth. Not a version of it softened down to protect his feelings, but the actual truth. I heard you. I know what was being planned. And I chose not to disappear quietly. That letter was the hardest thing I did through all of it. Harder than any legal document because it required me to love him clearly and honestly at the same time, without letting that love make me smaller. Glenn and Carol have a wind chime on the back porch. It's a small thing, but I hear it in the mornings when I sit with my coffee, and every time I do, I think, this is what it feels like to be somewhere you're wanted. Not tolerated. Not managed. Wanted. Emma's drawing arrived last week. A horse with a purple tail, just like she promised, with my name written across the top in green crayon, every letter a slightly different size. I taped it to the wall by the window in the afternoon light. That's enough. That is genuinely, completely enough.